Forward. Man is aware, and has been all throughout his existence, that certain members of his species are endowed with gifts and capabilities that are, to be perfectly mild, beyond the range of his more common brethren. This talent to see beyond the ordinary range of the five senses is as old as man himself, and all men, to a greater or lesser degree, are possessed of the capability to use this power. The ancient mystics, be they Egyptian, Chinese, Native American shaman, or old-fashioned spiritualist medium, all claimed the same extraordinary interaction with souls that had departed this physical plane and ascended unto the infinite. However, this amazing faculty is not more incredible than the naturally developed human faculties of speech, literacy, or basic learning. It is a radical, mostly unplumed, primal faculty of every sentient creature. And yes, you are psychic. By the end of this short booklet, the author hopes to convince you that you will soon be able to 1. Understand the very subtle forms of contact that exist between us and the multiform intelligences and hierarchies of the eternal. 2. Develop your own personal psychic mastery, overcome mental and spiritual difficulties, and gain control of the physical and subtle environments around you, a control that is your birthright. 3. How to connect with the intelligences not presently incarnate in this human level. The only thing to remember is that, barring some miracle, you may not begin experiencing immense powers immediately. With patience, however, you must be confident that eventually all roads lead to the same destination for those who will stretch out their minds and believe. Chapter 1. The Journey Up. My first powerful notion of a psychic world beyond the five senses came as a result of a childhood illness of which I almost died. I remember quite vividly lying in bed, sick from pneumonia, and drifting in and out of sleep. Suddenly, with what seemed to be a gradual sense of awakening, I came to realize that a strange light was opening in the ceiling of my bedroom. I was probably too amazed, for the time being, to do much more than lie there and stare in wonder. Suddenly it seemed as if the light opened up into a long, bright tunnel, and more amazing still, I felt as if my body began to levitate from the surface of the bed upon which I had previously been sleeping. My body began to float upward toward the tunnel of light. I even thought that I could see the image of someone, perhaps a little child, beckoning to me from the light beyond. I was suddenly terrified, not liking the giddy, lost sensation of floating uncontrollably upward. I began to thrash like a drowning swimmer, pulled along in a tide, and somehow I looked down at the bed below me. Miraculously then I could see that, in fact, I was not floating above the bed at all, but even more frightening, I had somehow managed to leave my body altogether, dead I suppose, below me. Of course, by some Herculean effort I managed to fight my inevitable death from pneumonia, and lived to write the words you are reading right now. Along the way, from dying child to author of this booklet, I have repeatedly experienced the intervention of phenomena that is as inexplicable as it is wonderful. The light inside. Once, when I needed money very badly, I was fortunate to have in my circle of friends a pagan minister, John Powell of Marion, Indiana, who provided me with a form of herbal incense, commonly called smudging, to increase positive developments. The mixture gave off a pleasant, somewhat intoxicating odor when repeatedly burned and left to smolder or smoke. Not at all convinced that this formula would provide me with any extra financial windfall, I carefully took the seashell he had provided for me and carefully placed a small quantity of the mixture in the shell. Grabbing a cigarette lighter, began to solemnly burn the stuff while walking around my rooms. Suddenly, as I began to burn the mixture and it began to smoke, a still, small voice in my head said, "Go downstairs and check your mailbox." I lived in an apartment building at the time, and in a general funk about my economic circumstances, had not bothered to check my mailbox for a few days. Well, lo and behold, I opened the box, just knowing inside myself that something was coming, and pulled out, to my complete and utter astonishment, a letter from my father. The situation was in and of itself strange, as I do not see eye to eye with my father, and we communicate rarely. Surprised, I hurriedly went upstairs and cut the letter open. Lo and behold, I pulled out a check for a considerable amount of money that my father had sent me from overseas as a peace offering. I felt that satisfying tingle or thrill run up my spine that let me know that something peculiar had just transpired. What was that still small voice inside that told me just then to go and check the mailbox? Was it God? A spirit guide? My own subconscious? My answer to all of them would be yes. That still small voice was my sixth sense awareness, or higher awareness, and it is a faculty that lies dormant within the reach of every man, woman, and child walking the face of the earth. This type of awareness was a crucial part of the survival skills of early man. Man has long been cognizant of the fact that he has an interchangeable and subtle relationship between the thoughts of his mind, the actions of his hands, and the reality of his environment. To what degree man can control this environment has always been a subject of strong debate. The rituals of voodoo and other tribal forms of religious worship seek to balance what must have seemed like the inhospitable forces of nature by propitiating the invisible forces that controlled the unfavorable manifestations. Thus, we have the magic of our ancestors who sought, using symbolic devices, control over the visible material world. The ancient prophets of the biblical scriptures, such as Nehemiah and Ezekiel, used their own psychic faculties to divine what they took to be the will of God. Information was relayed to them symbolically, as it is modern psychic dreamers, and this information had to be interpreted according to a personal set of values that was unique to each individual seer. And this faculty was not exclusive to the early Hebrews, but is present in the history and culture of every group on planet Earth. These prognosticators left us the rich details of their own personal visions in such documents as the Revelation of St. John the Divine and a myriad number of ancient texts. Probably the better-known prophets outside of the biblical or ancient sphere include the famed French seer Nostradamus, Mother Shipton, and in our modern era such psychic luminaries as Edgar Cayce, the Sleeping Prophet, and Jean Dixon. Voice of a devil. One must be carefully on guard at all times for lower entities, devils if you will, who will rise up against you at every opportunity and attempt to instill the seeds of doubt. These seeds, once planted, can grow the great oak of suffering, and consequently can affect the natural flow of psychic energy that is, we repeat, your birthright as a living and breathing individual. You have nothing to fear for attaining and beginning to use your innate psychic ability. This is a natural state of progression for every man, woman, or child who chooses to wake up and see the light and acknowledge the multidimensional aspects of their own being. Remember, there is no danger in exploring and utilizing your psychic potential, as such potential is as integral a part of your own being as the blood pumping through your veins. In fact, to really serve the forces of darkness, a person must close their eyes and minds and pretend there is no power in spirit. Calming the inner dialogue. To begin to utilize the inner faculties of psychic awareness, we must first learn to still our inner voice, or restless train of thoughts that flit in and out, weakening our faculties of concentration in a critical way. Stamp out any negativity and do not give in to the urge to become mired in self-doubt. Self-doubt is nothing more than delusion, for if all are God, then not one is without glory. Chapter 2. Power of the Medium. The chief conduit of intercession between physically encumbered humans and the higher source entities is the medium or spiritualist, who through the aid of an inherent ability to increase bodily awareness can act as a conduit of communication. This form of communication, as has been previously attested to, is as old as humankind. In the Bible, we have the story of the Witch of Endor, a prohibitive parable warning those that would visit those who keep company with familiar spirits of the danger of such intercourse. Much as King Saul was burned for his disobedient curiosity, so, assures us the Orthodox faith, we must be in danger of damnation if we head down the same pathway. This belief, I can assure you, is completely erroneous and is a good example of the manipulation of the scriptures by conspiratorial translators down through the ages. In the middle 19th century, the Fox sisters of Hydesville, New York, popularized the spiritualistic practices that had already been existent since the beginning of time. Their much publicized communication through the medium of rappings, knocking noises, with the discarnate entity they dubbed Mr. Splitfoot, gave birth to the spiritualist religion, and after both the Civil War and the First World War, such endeavors as seances, Ouija boards, automatic writing, etc., became popular pastimes for bereaved widows and mourning mothers. During the Cultural Revolution of the 60s, when Eastern mysticism and occult history became the obsessional stuff of young people devoted to testing every limit, the idea of a psychic faculty of man was given a firm new ground in which to grow. The 60s counterculture, in turn, fostered the New Age renaissance of the 70s and 80s with an emphasis on neo-paganism, channeling or transmediumship, scientific investigation of paranormal claims and UFO contact, as well as a focus on crystals and holistic health. The medium, thus, has had a place all down through the ages and may just qualify as the world's second oldest profession. Am I my body? Your body, or what you perceive to be your body, is nothing more than an illusion constructed from various waves and forms of subtle energy. The physical, for each adept understands, is not real at all. The physical form, each adept understands, is not real at all, but is simply the base illusion or bottom level of existence that controls and mollifies the higher levels of what you perceive to be your human being. The great psychologist Freud divided the psychic faculties of man into ego, self, superego, higher moral self, and id, base animalistic self. And he was after a fashion correct, as he was also referring to the true makeup of our imprisoned consciousness and what we experience as the phenomenological world. The highest form of awareness is your third eye awareness that extends from the third eye chakra in the center of the human forehead. This is the same region that houses the dormant pineal gland, which is believed to be the physiological center of our connection to the invisible world. Special helpers. Each individual, composed of a shifting myriad of energies, but embedded, as it were, in the dense levels of physical material existence, is privy to the care and attention of beings who have ascended unto higher levels of spiritual attainment. Oftentimes it is given to those who reach out with an open mind to begin a dialogue with the invisible teachers, resulting in writing or direct vocalization communication between incarnates, isolated, and disincarnates, or alternately, beings that, because of their abilities of understanding, did not descend to the world of gross physical existence. This communication has resulted in the vast body of literature obtained through visions, dreams, prophecies, and automatic or inspired writing. Egocentric and malevolent intelligences. Obviously, there are spirit intelligence of an obscene or egocentric caste who, seeking to maintain at all costs the illusion of individual existence, will maintain trouble for the psychically aware, and, in fact, will do what they can to befuddle, confuse, trouble, pester, and plague mankind, all the better to trap souls, they themselves are trapped, in the bottom level of physical incarnation. For to them, to maintain the illusion of individuation is their panacea, their drug, their reason for existence. Dissolution into the all is, for these beings, a terrifying proposition. The trouble these demons can create is substantial. Everything from minor ills, aches, and pains to major diseases and depression, and even demonic possession can result from the interference of these individual, deluded entities. The waking mind. Do not doubt for an instant that this waking life is anything more than a base illusion. The Hindu fakirs, men who perform astounding acts of bodily manipulation and self-mutilation, understand and accept matter as the stuff of illusion, the stuff of evil, if you will, the illusion that prevents the reintegration of individual consciousness with the greatness of all. The more subtle form of consciousness, the subconscious of psychic awareness that we must let guide us through the course of our existence, and which we ignore at our own peril, is a more direct link to the free-flowing spheres of consciousness. Thus, the uncontrollable realm of dreams, or the astral dreamscape, unquote, a place often manipulated in an illusory sense by malevolent entities, often affords the dreamer a peek at a deeper, significant, more emotive understanding. In fact, one might say that the real world is simply a continuation of the astral dreamscape state of beingness. In any case, this free-flow connection experienced by the sleeping mind that is responsible for the startling instances of psychic awareness experienced historically by sensitive dreamers. Storehouse of all knowledge. The Central Intelligence Agency, contrary to popular belief, is not located in Langley, Virginia. If that was the case, existence would be a very sad, hopeless state to experience. The Central Intelligence Agency, contrary to popular belief, is not located in Langley, Virginia. If that were the case, existence would be a very sad, hopeless state to experience. No. The real CIA, located everywhere and nowhere. No. The real CIA is located everywhere and nowhere. It is nothing less than the collective unconscious as posited by Professor Carl Jung, or better known to believers in psychic religions as the Akashic Records. Edgar Cayce. One of the pioneers of reading this storehouse of elusive knowledge was the Kentucky-born mystic Edgar Cayce. As a young man, Cayce was visited by angelic beings that promised they would always be with him and that he would be able to utilize extraordinary faculties and mental powers. In short order, Cayce began to manifest such strange abilities as being able to sleep on a book and knowing its entire contents upon awakening. Later he would find that, upon entering a seeming sleep state, he could diagnose the illnesses of people he had never met, interpret dreams to aid people through distressing psychological difficulties, and prophesy events far into the future, as well as relate the history of lost civilizations such as Atlantis and Mu. One incident had Cayce prescribing a rare drug for a woman, a drug that her pharmacist could not locate. Upon further consultation, Cayce correctly located the chemical behind a mess of disused bottles on the pharmacist's shelf, in a place he had never visited, located miles from him. Enhancing the spirit, meditation. The best way to develop psychic faculties is the art of meditation. Meditation can encompass several different forms, from a passive form which might be simply lying down, clearing the mind, and just being, to a more active form that might encompass the use of chants or mantras and the localization of all mental faculties to one point of concentration. The most important thing to remember is that the suspension of the restless internal monologue and the grasping of what might be termed mystical awareness, unquote, are of paramount importance to those who wish to cultivate psychic activity. Chapter 3. Seance. The religion of spiritualism has helped redefine man's relationship to the invisible world of psychic forces. Spiritualism has shattered the walls of separation between religious orthodoxy, scientific paradigm, and occult truth, and helped usher in a new era of understanding in the common man, who was assured, until the advent of spiritualism, that a relationship between himself and the world of spirit was impossible, confined only to the priest class who had the requisite knowledge and experience to attain it. Spiritualism, as we've stated in the last chapter, began with the Fox Sisters of Hydesville, New York, in the middle 19th century. Their home, a colonial habitat reputed to be haunted, was incorporated with an entity with a propensity for making nocturnal rappings. The girls, who dubbed the ghost Mr. Splitfoot, soon struck up a form of communication with the invisible resident, employing the same series of knocks. The rest, as they say, is history. Spiritualism evolved rapidly and became focused primarily upon the seance or spirit calling, a ritual that includes a number of people, usually seated around a table, oftentimes holding hands, all, hopefully, quietly focusing on an interaction with the spirit world. The focus of the group is the medium, a person able to act as a channel by which spirit can enter the room and make manifest. Spiritualism evolved rapidly and became focused primarily upon the seance or spirit calling, a ritual that includes a number of people, usually seated around a table. The medium, often a woman, will often have one or more spirit controls who will act as intermediaries between the world of spirit and those still bodily incorporated. Tables tilt, trumpets blow and speak, and objects mysteriously appear, levitate, disappear, etc. Oftentimes, strange, luminous materializations are reported to take place in full view of many startled witnesses. Of course, much of this activity takes place in darkened rooms, so the question and reality of fraud has dogged the spiritualist movement since its inception. The greatest of the professional spiritualist debunkers, or people who work to prove fraud in cases of purported paranormal happenings, was the noted prestidigitator Harry Houdini, born Eric Weiss to Jewish immigrant parents in Appleton, Wisconsin. Houdini, a close friend to Sherlock Holmes' creator and spiritualist advocate Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, had been very close to his mother before her death, and racked with grief, decided to attempt, through a medium, to communicate with her on the other side. After a particularly negative experience with a common fraud, Houdini decided to dedicate himself to exposing phony psychics, and became the proverbial thorn in the spiritualist side. He haunted the storefront parlors of various and sundry practitioners, exposing chicanery in national publications, and convincing authorities in a number of places to come down hard on the fortune-telling racket." Unquote. Houdini inculcated a witch hunt that unfortunately did more harm than good, and some suppose may have led to his untimely demise. It was the spirit control of medium Marjorie Crandon, quote, "the blonde witch of Baltimore," unquote, that first warned Houdini, who was participating in a rigorous test of the medium's skill, to lay off the spiritualists, unquote. Of course, it was not long afterward that Houdini, due to a burst appendix, died an untimely and tragic death. The supreme irony is that ritually a seance has been held every Halloween to try and contact the spirit of Houdini, and according to some anecdotes, Mrs. Houdini, Bess, was convinced that the medium Reverend Arthur Ford had actually managed to do it. Houdini and his wife had agreed upon a prearranged message which a legitimate medium would have to deliver were he actually in communication with the spirit of Harry Houdini. The message? Rosabelle, believe. Reverend Ford is reported to have actually known this message, which was a secret only Harry and Bess had ever shared. Whether Reverend Ford actually learned the words from Houdini himself, or merely used psychic awareness to divine what they were, is a matter of conjecture and, most probably, personal perspective. The trappings of the seance room were typically dim lighting, curtains, a circular table, oftentimes with a trumpet, tambourine, or other such musical instruments, and perhaps some objects that were special or significant to the departed person whose presence is being sought. The medium, sometimes preferring to perform behind a curtained alcove, or sometimes in a specially designed spirit cabinet, would begin the circle with prayer or the singing of one or two hymns. The sitters would hold hands, and manifestations of psychical force could take the form of anything from strange rapping, voices being emitted from trumpet, eerie music, phosphorescent glows, or even levitation and full-scale materialization of the spirit control and other departed entities. The medium, depending upon what, specifically as our own special talent or area of concentration, might also communicate through direct voice, may relate information known only to the departed and his relatives, may engage in automatic writing upon a slate, or the writing may just seem to appear, or may produce ectoplasm strings from mouth, nose, eyes, etc. Ectoplasm, incidentally, is known as the physical stuff that allows spirits to take material form. Apports, or materialized objects that appear from nowhere, such as objects that have been lost by the relatives of the deceased, are also a common occurrence of the traditional seance. None of this is, of course, verified and quantified by the esteemed arbiters of reality that decide upon the legitimacy of such phenomena, but they do occur with regular frequency. Of course, the ability to manifest such phenomena is completely dependent upon the health and sincerity, the personal magnetism and psychic development of the medium, who is the central focus of energy and the gateway by which psychic energy may manifest itself to the individuals gathered. It is important to remember that, depending upon the personality of the departed, a presence may not come forth when called. Also, some entities may manifest in unfavorable mood or character, and some presences called forth can be downright nasty. It is important for the medium, at least, if not for the sitters also, to focus on only manifestations from the light or high side of spirituality. A short period of time focusing this all-encompassing light upon ourselves, visualizing it protecting and comforting us, is essential to ensuring a successful interaction with the spirit world. Seek someone specific when calling upon the spirits of the departed, and when confronted with an unworthy representation of the invisible chorus, demand them to, quote, "Get thee hence." It is advised that one take great care when beginning any process of physical mediumship. Allowing a spirit to enter the physical form can be a tricky, testing, and often dangerous experience. Oftentimes, results may at first be lacking due to the inexperience of the medium in being able to access the higher frequencies of communication. Remember, we are encumbered by these physical forms, deluded into accepting them as what is real. It is highly difficult, even while in trance, to shuffle off the clinging fingers of a material delusion. However, in time you will find that there are angels and guides waiting on you just beyond the veil, eager to keep you safe and bring you home. At any rate, despite the danger, the rewards far outweigh anything negative. In fact, every individual must begin a relationship with these guides from beyond who are calling to all of us. Yet some are too asleep to answer. The astral voyage. One last word must be said of the ability to astral project, or for the human being to disassociate the small conscious self and psychically project outward into the infinite. This separation of the other, or the astral form, from the everyday consciousness can come about as a result of intense effort, meditation, or concentration, or in the midst of a terrifying, life-threatening, or painful situation. Or it might happen quite by accident during the course of an otherwise normal night's sleep. In this elevated, perhaps a better word would be disconnected state, an individual may access any number of frequency ranges, travel the myriad realms of higher illusion beyond this gross physical state, meet and work with any number of helpful guides, or travel parts unknown upon the planet Earth. Although it is arguable as to whether or not a person in this state can manifest or be seen by humans not engaged in astral travel, it seems likely that astral projection accounts for the various reports of bilocation, the appearance of the same individual in two separate locations at once, reported down through the years. Ghostly perambulations. There are a myriad of very intelligences attempting to pierce the veil of your reason and rationality in an effort to guide you in a variety of different ways. Some of these spirits can be considered guides, helping spirits, angels, even ascended masters. They realize that incarnate as you are in a seeming physical or bottom-level vessel, you need the assistance of benevolent, discarnate, and higher frequency personalities to guide you out of the continuous loop of physical incarnations, the wheel of rebirth. Likewise, there are egocentric entities whose power and understanding are of the same high frequency, but whose psychological dependence upon the illusion of independent existence is so all-encompassing they refuse to do anything but birth in all other beings around them, to solidify the illusion of separation and maintain for themselves individual identity at the cost of the reintegration of conscious beings into the totality of the all. These demons will do whatever they can to drive man stone mad. But remember, as foul and as powerful as they are simply another manifestation of the divided, fractionalized oneness. To return to a more pedestrian train of thought, though, the spirits that attempt to contact us do so for their own reasons, but if they are of a higher than common, they will seek to edify whoever they choose to congregate with. One example of incidental paranormal manifestation not directed specifically to a certain individual is the classical haunting. Some examples of haunting follow. However, let me preface these by saying that while I have personally seen a ghost, communicate with spirits, and adhere to the spiritualist creed, I cannot vouch for the authenticity of the examples which follow. Resurrection Mary, or the Vanishing Hitchhiker. The story of Resurrection Mary, or the ghost of a young woman reported to haunt Resurrection Cemetery in Chicago, Illinois, beckoning for motorists to stop and give her a lift, follows closely on the tradition of the Vanishing Hitchhiker. Accounts of Mary vary, but the most famous has an anonymous motorist stopping because of a lonely-looking young woman standing on the shoulder of the road. The motorist invites the strange young woman, who seems to be clad in the sort of diaphanous evening gown favored by apparitions in such tales, into the car for a lift. The driver speeds on. The young woman seems particularly strange and withdrawn. By some accounts, she may start to speak about how she died, where or in what row of the cemetery her body lies, etc. Suddenly, in a blast of reeking smoke, she seems to merely vanish. This is an old tale, probably with a nugget of truth buried in it somewhere. Some variations include, invariably a tragic young woman, giving the driver directions to an old house. Invariably, the spirit is always a tragic young woman. Upon getting out of the car, some variations include, Some variations include, but all of these are invariably involve a tragic young woman, giving the driver directions to an old house. Upon getting out of the car and going up the walk to the front door, the driver realizes that the hitchhiking young lady has disappeared, and also a strange mist seems to be clinging to the ground. The driver then notices an incredible feeling of loss, and after ascending the rickety old porch and knocking on the door, is met with the figure of a lonely old woman. She informs him that, quote, "If this is some sort of joke, sir, I am not amused. My daughter died 7 years ago tonight." Or, alternately, and perhaps even more chillingly, the woman at the door expresses no surprise at the presence of the baffled driver, relating, "This happens every year on this night. She comes back and tries to hitch a ride home. Sir, you aren't the first person to drive the ghost of my daughter here." Martin Sheets. One of the most blackly humorous ghost stories I know involves the eccentric Indiana businessman named Martin Sheets. Sheets, a dowdy old fellow that made his fortune in the Great War, became deathly afraid, perhaps after reading The Premature Burial by Edgar Allan Poe, of being interred alive. In an era before embalming became a standard practice, this was a reasonable enough fear. However, the eccentric Mr. Sheets took precaution one step further and had built for himself a special mausoleum, complete with reclining bed, food, an unsealed casket, and most importantly, a telephone. Mr. Sheets assumed that, upon awakening from coma and finding himself prematurely interred, he might call for help, relax, soothe his nerves with a glass of his favorite Bordeaux, and have a bit of a nosh while he was waiting for rescue. Of course, inevitably, Mr. Sheets succumbed to a final illness many years later, and was, most assuredly, in no danger of being buried alive. However, since he had spent considerable money building his specially modified resting place, it was decided that the body should be placed inside for its eternal repose. The edifice itself was never altered, nor was the special telephone line disconnected. His widower, a short time later, tragically some would say, mysteriously, also died of an apparent heart attack. Or, she was found with an absolute look of terror upon her face, the receiver of the telephone clutched tightly to her breast. Relatives chuckled nervously. Gossips wagged their tongues. People wondered. When finally the vault was opened, by the telephone company no less, it was discovered that somehow the phone had been taken off the hook. Did Mr. Sheets put in a spectral phone call to his bereaved widow, inviting her to join him in his earthly tomb? One can almost hear the spook show cackles resound at the finish of this little ghost story. Ghosts, ghosts, all I see are ghosts. Of course, there is no end to haunted hotels, haunted resorts, haunted Victorian or colonial or medieval houses, and haunted cemeteries. There is even reportedly a haunted toy store somewhere in Florida. I can't vouchsafe for this. Only first-hand experience can conclusively prove anything. There are even apparitions attributed to the living, in the same sense as bilocation, and many stories of this sort were collected by Messieurs Podmore and Gurney in their classic study, Phantasms of the Living. Called crisis apparitions, these ghosts of people still incorporated in the flesh are often known to appear to relatives and close friends at the moment of their passing, or if their lives are in danger. Some famous instances include the World War II officer who, while sitting in his office, looked up to see unexpectedly a close friend and fellow soldier standing looking at him with a strange, lost expression. Upon rising to greet the man, the officer is astounded when, without saying a word, his friend turns, walks out the door, and seemingly disappears. Later, the officer finds that at that exact same moment, his friend's plane was shot down by an enemy fighter, and that the man that had just appeared to him was, at that same time, killed. These apparitions can, likewise, serve to warn of an impending tragedy as well. Everyone knows the story of actress Sharon Tate, who was murdered by members of the Charles Manson cult in 1969 in her Beverly Hills home. It is less well known, however, that Sharon, wife of Roman Polanski, director of the supernatural thriller Rosemary's Baby, had a strange vision while sleeping in the home of friend Jay Sebring, who also died the night of the Manson slayings. Sebring, a hairstylist who had bought the former home of suicided Hollywood producer Paul Byrne, was away when Sharon swore that she saw Byrne's ghost enter her bedroom one night. And, even more chilling, Sharon also told a reporter that she saw a literal vision of Jay Sebring hanging from a rope, dead. This was the way the Manson killers left him, hanging like a slaughtered animal, with Sharon beside him, not long after. Grim happenings leave their impression. We do not wish to be macabre or grotesque, only to impress upon the reader that oftentimes horrifying events leave their impression in the surrounding environment as ghostly happenings. There are no end to Civil War ghost stories, from spectral battlefield reenactments to the psychic mysteries surrounding the assassination of Lincoln, and there are seemingly no end to the stories of tragic happenings in ancient, moldering dwellings that leave their mark on the environment in the form of haunting phenomena. Chapter 4. My own phantom encounter. My own personal sightings of ghosts includes that of the late librarian from Muncie, Indiana, named Florence Bly. It was soon after Pearl Harbor when the city of Muncie, Indiana began preparing for what they felt might be an inevitable Japanese invasion of America. Military drills were held in residential areas, that the first blackout drills, unquote, were practiced. Florence Bly, a small-town librarian of whom which little is known, was staying at the Hotel Roberts in downtown Muncie, an old edifice that has housed some famous and infamous personages inside its walls throughout the years. Florence fell from the 6th-story window during the blackout to her immediate death. Florence fell from the 6th-story window during the blackout to her immediate death. She was carrying a purse, wearing a heavy winter coat, and carrying a card that read, "In case of death, please take me to Meek's mortuary." Suicide, perhaps? She was thought to be despondent over a romance that had gone sour. But if a suicide, why was she dressed as if she was getting ready to exit the room and perhaps leave the hotel? If she was simply looking at the blackout from her window, why did she have her coat, and why was she carrying her purse? Why did she have a card saying, "In case of death, please take me to Meek's mortuary," when she wasn't even a resident of Muncie? These are questions to which we will never know the answers. However, what is known is that on certain moonlit nights, it is said that visitors walking outside the Hotel Roberts have supposedly sighted the mournful image of a dour, plain-looking woman staring from one of the darkened windows on the 6th floor. I can personally vouch for the authenticity of this ghost myself because I have seen it firsthand. It was several years ago now during a ghost hunting trip to the Hotel Roberts made by myself and some young friends. The phenomenon of dreams offers the world of spirit a continual ready opportunity to make communication with us. Anecdotes of psychical dreams, precognitive dreams, and the like fill volumes. What is more, there are a myriad number of books and analysis on dream interpretation, all of them offering varying degrees of reliable information, most of them differing considerably on particulars. Of course, amazing instances of psychic dreaming are a staple of the human experience. Mark Twain reportedly dreamed the death of his brother, a steward on a riverboat, and not only dreamt the death, but also how the body would be laid out in its casket, with a new suit of clothing, a bouquet of white flowers with a single red rose in the center. This situation came to pass exactly as Mark Twain foresaw it. Of course, very often dreams are nothing more than an attempt of the subconscious mind to create symbols or representations of what it struggles with in and of itself. But the mind predominates. Automatic writing. One of the most fascinating forms of communication between our world and the world of spirit is the practice of automatic writing. Many volumes have been produced by this means, and collectively they comprise a wealth of oft-ignored literature, a literature of the spirit. During automatic writing, the practitioner typically takes pen or pencil in hand, and doing their best to not interfere, lets spirit communicate a flow of messages and ideas through them. The resultant script is often so unlike that normally thought to be of the author that there is little doubt that some sort of supernatural agency is working through them. One of the most fascinating volumes to be written this way is the Oaspe Bible, or the Cosmon Bible of Jehovah and his angel ambassadors, a massive tome dictated to a Victorian dentist named John Ballow Newbrough from higher source entities, who originate, or so they claim, on other planets, albeit at higher levels of vibration. Other famous channeled works include the contemporary books of Channel J.Z. Knight, who channels the 35,000-year-old Atlantean master Ramtha, and the Urantia book, another huge extraterrestrial religious document channeled by a nephew of the famous Battle Creek Sanitarium founder John Harvey Kellogg. Direct voice communication. Everyone is familiar with the famous scene in the movie The Amityville Horror when the young man is confronted by a terrifying demonic voice and instructed to get out. Yet spirits communicating by direct voice is not just a subject for the movies, but is another aspect of spirit manifestation. I remember as a child my first conscious experience with hearing externalized phantom voices. I was living at the time on a military base in Panama, Central America, a country with its own traditions and legends, psychic vortices, voodoo, and spirits. I had been pedaling my bicycle around a large sort of courtyard flanked by military housing on all sides, with a sidewalk that ran the length of the field. In the center of the huge courtyard area were some swings and a slide, like you would find on a playground park. I remember passing a house and suddenly hearing a strange sort of shrieking sound, almost like the hissing shriek of a cougar or similar wildcat. It was very unsettling and seemed to emanate from the vicinity of one lonely building, whose vacant windows still seemed to stare at me darkly in my mind at times. I thought at first that it might be an animal, so I stopped my bike, put the kickstand down, and left it on the sidewalk, approaching the house to investigate. I soon realized that, oddly, this sound didn't seem to be coming from anywhere, but instead seemed to be all around me, surrounding me. It seemed to defy logic. For a moment I was too fascinated to be afraid. Then suddenly the cougar screech molded seamlessly into a roar. Not an animal roar, mind you, but the roar of a man possessing the spirit of a beast. An angry, inhuman, psychopathic sound that seemed to be everywhere and come from nowhere. I very quickly ran to my bike and pedaled away. The place suddenly gave me a deeply malignant feeling, as if it had once been the spot for a terrible, breathtaking evil. Later, I asked a playmate of mine about the place, and he answered in the affirmative. Quote, "That place scares me," unquote, he said, in his inimitable childlike way, and to this day I have no explanation for those strange phantom cries. Of course, everyone is familiar with phantom voices in old houses, with wailing women and baleful banshees. Everyone has seen the films about demoniac possession, where hideous cacophony of horrific voices erupts like twisted music from the gibbering mouths of the possessed. Father Malachi Martin, in his book Hostage to the Devil, makes mention of this as one of the key stages of exorcism, when overlapping choruses of spirit voices seem to flow unbidden from the mouth. It is thought that spirits may somehow construct an ectoplasmic, the physical substance of spirit, larynx with which to communicate in this direct way. This could account for the often excessively guttural quality of spirit voices. EVP, Electronic Voice Phenomenon. One of the most fascinating developments in the world of spirit communication is the subject of electronic voice phenomena, or EVP. Typically, this involves the employment of some sort of recording equipment. A simple tape recorder will do, and a clean blank tape. The tape is left to record silence or questions are asked aloud. When the tape is played back, gruff, atonal voices can often be heard. Sometimes the messages they convey are cryptic, and sometimes they seem to be responding to the environment around them. More rarely, they answer questions or queries directly. The most fascinating examples of this sort of spirit communication involves the employment of electronic sound devices such as the Spiricom device invented in 1980 by scientist George Meek and psychic Bill O'Neill, resulting in many hours of, admittedly difficult to discern, conversation with the deceased. Of course, skeptics scoffed that this didn't prove anything, except that a psychic could transmit his thoughts to an electrical machine to transmit them as a frequency of sound. Of course, if they could believe that, well, you know. I have heard many startling examples of EVP and have experimented with it myself to some small success. The teacher within. Of course, for many of us, the primary way in which spirits will seek to make communication will be that, quote, still small voice, unquote, within, that most of us simply call intuition, but which is our faculty of conscience. Of course, to fully utilize this faculty of internal communication, it is important that we learn to still other, less savory voices, master our often riotous train of thought, and learn to listen to what the still small voice is saying inside. We don't need apparitions, spirit voices, chills, goosebumps, or pictures of glowing orbs to convince us that the world beyond is ready, waiting, and open for us. The evidence is planted within. The teacher of your own soul is you. Choosing between love and despair. The two great polarities of human conscience are the emotions of love and fear. These two polar opposites are the primal stuff from which the world of matter and spirit is born. Love is the supreme center of all, the final state of oneness to which all creatures are moving. If someone asks you what is love, tell them it is the final state of oneness of all things. If someone asks you what is the final state of oneness, tell them it is love. They are one and the same. Egocentric entities, personalities trapped in the denser vibrational levels just above this dense physical state, are content to maintain the illusion of separation which results in the hallucination of individual existence for themselves. To submit to reintegration with the all is the death of them. So they seek to sow the seeds of separation, imprisoning man, bottom level, isolated, or is-olated man in the dense, manipulated illusion of what we perceive to be reality. In fact, this vision of reality exists only in our mind, and because perception is not merely the totality of experience, but in fact is the totality, then we can alter the landscape of our lives merely with the strength of thought. Learning to forgive. The most important act a person must perform upon the pathway to inner light is the act of forgiving the transgression of those who have wronged you, or even those that continue to do so. Forgiving and letting go of the past will go a long way toward freeing you of the mental clutter that will inhibit the growth of your natural psychic functioning. Cultivate an aura of kindness as much as possible, but take care that you don't come off looking like a doormat. Remember that like attracts like, and making a positive impact on the environment around will resonate strongly and allow positivity to find you in abundance. Avoid cultivating negative or destructive thoughts. Avoid self-deprecation. Likewise, avoid unfair or malicious comments about others. At all times, be sure to test your spirit concerning what sort of media manipulation and control you choose to subject yourself to. Is the entertainment you are choosing advocating harmful actions, gross sensuality, violence, or breeding in yourself negative thinking patterns? What is it you are feeding your head? Learn to be critical as well concerning what causes you support and beliefs you hold. Is patriotism at the expense of moral rightness a worthwhile belief to hold? Stop and consider if, when you watch the evening news, if you are really being told the full facts about anything, and be careful to avoid making snap judgments. Avoid fatty foods and excess of sugar, caffeine, red meat, and foods high in sodium. Do not use alcohol or tobacco products, or for heaven's sake, don't use them excessively. Seek to achieve in all things moderation. It is only while walking the middle path between one extreme and the other, between the fire of passion and the ice of apathy, that one can achieve anything amounting to spiritual equilibrium. Find a tranquil setting or create one in your home by placing a small table in a corner of the room with some crystals, incense, or other sacred objects upon it. This will make your home a personal space that is more inviting to spirit. For the most part, you should work to bring about a sense of balance and peace in your daily routine. The importance of meditation. The importance of meditation in achieving altered state conducive to spiritualistic intercession cannot be overstressed. To achieve anything, there must be a period of try, when these essential skills are honed into a more ready and willing instrument. No one, except the gifted, can hope to sit down cold and take advantage of their inherent psychic ability, and simply knowing of its existence is not enough. Success comes to those willing to put forth the effort. Meditation is a simple act of stilling the consciousness, replacing the million small delusions of existence with a clear, directed form of thought, wherein the reception of spiritual energy and truth may be manifested in an external sense. Sit quietly while breathing in slowly and deeply. Traditional yogic poses such as the lotus are fine, but are unnecessary. Sitting with your legs folded is sufficient so long as the diaphragm is not constricted nor breathing labored. Begin to breathe in deeply, drawing air into your lung capacity, then letting it out entirely in one steady motion. At the same time, try to phase out the constant chatter of racing thoughts in your mind. Still your awareness to one point and let it be. You may wish to begin chanting a mantra or a word to help you clear your mind and bring you into a greater sense of oneness with the All. This can be the traditional Om, a Hindu chant, Yahweh, or Zem, or whatever chant works best for you. The emptying out of meditation is essential to spiritual development. It is a core part of the growth and nurturing of psychic faculties. One thing that may be helpful are flower essences and gemstone elixirs, as well as the burning of herbal smudges, the playing of soft, mystical, or religious music, and the carrying of crystals about your person in a pouch or as a necklace. Most of these items will be available at local metaphysical or pagan shops, or you can collect herbs and crystals for yourself using the guidance of a wide variety of books on the subject. Finally, the nature of bereavement is such that, upon the death of a friend or close relative, a sense of pervading loss can fester like a wound, leaving a sense of closure for those left behind. However, the mortal essence, the departed intelligence, can be contacted, consulted with, and can offer comfort to the bereaved. This can be achieved through the agency of spiritualistic mediumship. It must be kept in mind, however, that, at base, such contact is merely another aspect of the falsity of existence, or what Aleister Crowley called the ruach, the leftover, the left behind, as the true essence moves onward, as the entities being contacted are still simply illusory aspects of the same whole or one. Some messages of Zen. These communications were delivered through the medium of automatic writing on this day of July 29th, 2005, to the author, just past the hour of midnight. Reality is a dream from which few ever awake. Death is an illusion. Games are played between the two polarities of life and death, games of talent. People add nothing but misery to their lot by playing games. No race is ever worth a destination, for often the runner will find that he has only been running circles around himself. Stop, look, listen, think. Is it worth it to run the race course of existence? No good ever came from worry. No one has ever saved his sanity while in the grip of fear. Instead, acknowledge the fact of your own demise as a foregone conclusion. After this, all else will seem trivial. Notice the asses of the field. They carry the burden of their existence uncomplainingly, seeking to be nothing more or less than what they are. And how much more valuable you are than many asses. Money is the stuff of care and worry. Do not acknowledge its existence, neither seek to forget its worth. No lady is worth more than a good sound word of wisdom. Likewise no man. Give up all to God. To God, all matters seem trivial. Nagging another is like murdering silence. No good ever came from killing another in haste. Family is the only comfort and the greatest stumbling block in a young man's existence. In a choice between love and hate, it would be better to hate than to feel no passion at all. Gone is the day when man can slip through life an unwilling player in this dreadful sport. Nailed to the door is our declaration of freedom. Night has fallen across the face of civilization. Reach toward a new goal or destination before it is too late. Gaining the world is like capturing the wind. Of what value is a handful of wind? On what can you spend the wind? What can you purchase with it? The best use to which it can be put is sailing or flight, and whatever sails or flies will eventually stop or fall back to earth. All is vanity. Lies are the money of the wicked. They would purchase a kingdom with their falsehoods. Honesty is the best trait to possess. It will purchase you more than riches are worth. You are a part of me, and I am all that is. There is no more. And that concludes the small book, Glory, There is Power in Spirit.